give you our live.
Hello and welcome on board the morning safari. This is a live safari for those of you who may have stumbled upon this site for the first time, and it's a great pleasure to have all of you along with us. My name is Scott. I'm teamed up with Tebs on camera. We've got Kirsty directing the show with Nikki lending her a hand, filtering through all your questions. And to send in questions, comments and thoughts, it's very easy. You hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or send an email through to questions@WildEarthTV. Now, as you can see, it's dark at the moment. It's very early in the morning here in South Africa, and it should start getting light in about 15 or 20 minutes. And it all depends on the cloud cover that's overhead. We got a really good amount of rain last night, which is wonderful because we had an initial storm in the afternoon which delayed the sunset safari ever so slightly by about 45 minutes, I think. And then a second storm came through a little bit later, just after we actually finished the sunset safari. So it rained until probably about 1 or 2 o'clock last night, I'm guessing. So really wonderful for this drought-stricken land. Hello to Oki in Oklahoma, who has, even before the safari got started, they let us know how remarkable the sound of all the frogs were that they heard on the Djuma waterhole camera, which is a live waterhole camera that brings a feed to you guys 24 hours a day. And Oki, you're right, it is absolutely phenomenal. Not only how loud the chorus of these amphibians are, but how quickly they are activated after the rain. So, magical stuff. And the good news is that in 15 or 20 minutes, when it does get light enough to be on foot safely, you're going to be going on a little bit of a stroll through the wilderness with Jamie Patterson. And I'm hoping that you are going to be able to find some of the smaller creatures like the frogs and amphibians and little reptiles and insects that are going to emerge after these rains. Not only the aquatic animals that enjoy the rain, but a lot of the insects too. Already last night there was flying ants, reproductive termites. Flying ants is the incorrect terminology that I often use, which is very naughty of me. But the reproductive termites, the winged elates, were emerging last night, very small ones. So we may find a lot of birds out today cashing in on all the insects that have emerged from this rain. The plan for myself is to start heading towards the northwestern corner of Djuma in the hope that the Inkahuma pride, a pride of 5 lioness, are going to have returned onto our property. So we're not too far from the area where I'm expecting to find some tracks. Morning, Sacrosanct. You would like to know if we didn't manage to locate any leopard yesterday on the sunset safari, and no, you didn't miss out on any leopard. There is some good news for you. No sign of leopard at all yesterday actually, so we didn't even have any tracks to follow up on. And that's not to say they're not here on Djuma or Arathusa, it just means we're looking in the wrong spots, or their tracks are hard to see. They've been walking in areas where it's not easy to spot their tracks. Even now we're going to have our work cut out for us, and what's interesting is I'm sure a lot of you will be guessing after a deluge of rain that it will be easier to track because the ground will be soft and muddy. To a degree, yes, but it all depends on the actual soil substrate in any given area. This road, I can assure you right now, if a leopard or a lion walked down it, it would be difficult to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out to show you what I mean. As I jump out, you'll already be able to hear the frogs and insects that are calling quite loudly right now. So, I weigh as much as a leopard on average, and not much to see with regards to tracks, and that's even with quite fine ridges in my strops. What do you call this? I'm not sure what you may call this kind of shoe. in your respective countries. And isn't it wonderful that people are watching all around the world? So it gives you an idea of what we're dealing with regards to tracking the animals down. Also bearing in mind that I'm talking to you guys a lot, I'm shining the spotlight at the moment around, I'm watching the road. It's not easy to have my eyes cast permanently on the road, which is not what trackers will do, but for those of you who are new, most safari vehicles in the Sabi Sands, or just about all of them, will actually have trackers perched on the hood. We call it a bonnet here in South Africa of the vehicle, and there's a seat on the front left where this funny virtual reality rig is positioned now, and their job is not to entertain the guests so much or talk to the guests so much, even of course it's promoted that they do, but they are allowed to focus on their major job, and that is to track and find animals. And by being perched up there and not having to entertain the guests as much as the guides are, they can really focus on looking at the road, searching around, also up in the trees and termite mounds for spotting animals. But we don't have that privilege, sadly. Oh, it's starting to rain. I'm not sure if you can see. There we go. You can see a very slight kind of drizzle falling, and there are a lot of clouds above us. So I was hoping that this wasn't going to happen, but we may need to get out some of our rain covering equipment. This, let me jump out so I can show you everything. Oh, it's starting to come down quite thick and hard now, so I'm going to have to be quick. I'm going to show you the sombrero quickly. Tebs is busy wrapping the camera up, so he's not going to be able to pan around, so I'm going to have to do human panning. This device is called the sombrero, and it's like a big hat that wraps around the camera and keeps that kind of stuff clean. Clean, by clean I mean dry. There you go, Tebs. And for those of you who weren't on the drive yesterday, there's some good news. Thanks, Tebs, for the VR rig. So we're multitasking here. This little cover was from a raincoat. It's going to go on top of the VR rig. I don't think you can see me though, but it's on. The VR rig is now safe from the elements. Now a few more little bits and pieces, but as I was saying, the good news is we are fine-tuning the current rain system, which I've called the sieve because it doesn't work, and we have got a new one lined up, and it's hopefully going to be made very soon, so that's something to look forward to. And I think just by the time we get everything covered up, I think the rain's actually stopped. Oh well, at least we're ready for the next little onset of moisture. Sorry about this, everyone, but this is an example of how this current system is not the best. Alright, just about there. Tebs is just trying to wrap the camera up. The problem is that the cover for the camera, imported from Italy or somewhere like that, is not the right cover, so it's not as easy as you'd expect it to be to get that cover on. Alright, one last step in this whole procedure is to plug my earpiece in, and then I'll be back in communication with all of you. And the rain has literally stopped completely. Oh! A reproductive termite just flew past me. Try to grab onto it to show it to you. It's quite a big one. Good. To basically in Massachusetts, and we are hoping that we can possibly see some frogs. You all get there, Tibbs? Yes, most certainly. I'm not sure if you joined a little bit late, but I did mention that Jamie is going to be heading out on a bushwalk, and she will be in the prime position to search for frogs and show them to you. On the vehicle, we're very limited, basically, because the camera is stuck to the center of it, which means getting up close and personal with animals without disturbing them can be a little bit tricky, and we try as much as possible to not disturb the animals in any way, shape or form. And yes, most certainly Jamie's plan, and it's a cunning plan that she made in the... Oh, we went to another reproductive termite that I tried to latch onto. The cunning plan is to go out and do this bushwalk because of the rains and because of the likelihood of being able to find some smaller critters. Basically, we could get lucky though. The two kinds of amphibians we could see from the vehicle is a bushveld rain frog, awesome little frog that's got short legs and it like waddles. It's not really an agile jumping frog, it's a waddling frog with a big fat body and tiny little legs, barely big enough to carry its body. Either that or the giant African bullfrog. Those are two amphibious species that we could bump into on the roads, but the others will all be in small puddles and in the trees and bushes. Okay, just trying to get this flap out the way. I'm told it's causing trouble with the audio, so that should be a little bit better. Morning, Reese. Good to have you with us. And Reese is interested to know whether my heart rate increases and I get a little bit scared when I jump out the vehicle in the dark. Yes, most certainly. The dark means dangerous out here. During the light, I will be happy to explore this wilderness area far more so than in the darkness. And even when I just jumped out there, I knew I wasn't going far from the vehicle. I made sure I had a good scan around. What can be deceiving is that the camera may make it look slightly darker than what it is in some situations, and it may make the situation look slightly lighter than it actually really is in some situations. So that's something to bear in mind. But yes, moving around in the darkness certainly is a lot more scary and requires a lot more situational awareness, which is a great term, I believe, and a very important one as a guide or in the guiding industry. And to be aware of your situations and your surroundings is critically important to avoid being swallowed by something or stood on by something. And that means you're just listening, watching. So if you can see where I'm shining the spotlight there, there's a reproductive termite there. So that's the winged elate, a reproductive termite that I was talking about earlier. It's probably just under an inch in length. The biggest one we get you, and hopefully once it's a bit lighter we can try and find where they are emerging from, because if we can find an emergence point we will be sure to find a lot of birds there, possibly even some reptiles and frogs gobbling them up. Who knows? It wasn't too long ago that Peter Pretorius was lucky enough to have a hyena walking through the quarantine clearings, catching these flying ants in the air and eating them, and they're an incredibly high source of protein. So even hyena, a large carnivore, will feed on these little critters. It can be a very good place to sit and watch and wait. Hello, Bill, and you didn't realize realize it was so dark when we started in the mornings. It's getting progressively darker every day, and we will be changing the times to better suit these changing sunrise times. So from the 1st of February we will be going out not at 5 o'clock Central Africa time, it will be 5:30. So that's the plan. Ideally we would have been adapting with 15-minute increments so that we can be more in tune with the sunrise and time things accordingly, but the decision was decided that half-an-hour increments were better, so that's that. But it's quite nice actually. I mean, there's pros and cons to every scenario, I guess, and essentially now what's interesting is we're doing the night drive with the spotlights first thing in the morning, and we're finishing at night with enough light not to even switch on the lights really. So we've kind of inverted the usual game drive practice. Usually you'll finish the end of your drive with a spotlight and start your drive in the morning with no lights required. But there's many different ways to skin a cat, they say. So we are skinning it upside down at the moment. I'm wondering from the 1st of February, we'll probably be going out later in the morning and later in the afternoon, but I'll wait for confirmation on that. Hello to Safari Dean, who would like to know if I have ever worked as a tracker. And no, not officially Safari Dean. Usually the tracking role is done by a local African person, and the reason for that is that they have been spending so much time out in these surrounding areas tending to cattle and goats and immersing themselves in this wilderness area. Now, even though for quite some time now there haven't been wild animals outside the reserve, the vegetation is the same, the birds, the trees, and the art of tracking a lost goat or a lost cow is the same as tracking a leopard or any animal. And their senses are simply far more heightened to the art of tracking. It's an art, it's a science, it's a jumble of different things, but it's an incredibly tricky thing, tracking down wild animals, and 99% of the time it is done by the local African people, whichever area you may be working in or on safari. Our first post-rain animal is the giant African land snail. This looks like an incredibly old specimen. Look at all the ants out and about around it. That's really awesome. And it got a little bit of a fright as we arrived. Understandably, we are far, far larger than it and have arrived with some bright shining lights. Before I forget, just to confirm, the afternoon or sunset safari times are not changing for the time being, so we'll keep you updated on that. It's just the sunrise safari that's going to be shifted half an hour later from the 1st of February, which is in maybe a week or so. I'm not too sure whereabout we are in the month. Oh, look on Tibbs, if you don't mind going to the top left of your screen, you can see the ants actually carrying away a reproductive termite there. There we go. Your focus is perfect now. Not easy to see, but you can see a few wings of reproductive termites that have already been dropped off, and they will drop their wings once they've landed, and then a male and female will start searching for a place to start their termitarium. But there you can see it now, its wings are up, the ants are carrying its wings and body and all away. So the first animal that's cashing in on the termites are the ants. I saw an absolutely remarkable video on termites just a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if it's true, but it certainly is believable. And what happened was, in the course of research and science, some people went and they emptied, I think, 10 tons of liquid cement down some cavities into a termitarium and returned a couple of weeks later and started excavating this termitarium. And they found what was an incredible city of columns and tunnels and fungus farming areas. I mean, it is absolutely remarkable how much goes on underground with termites, and literally what we're seeing above the earth a lot of the time, if anything, is just the tip of the iceberg. So these animals are incredibly crucial to the ecosystem, and not only do they do an incredible job decomposing and breaking down dead plant matter that is unpalatable by most other species, so really old, tough plants and plant matter really, that they recycle back into the ecosystem and also provide huge amounts of different animals with a source of protein. And to give you an idea of how many termites there are, it is said that their biomass outweighs that of all the mammals in this area. So there are absolutely millions of them. And even though we don't see them that often, that doesn't mean that they're not playing a crucially important role in the ongoings of what happens here and the nutrient cycles and the food chain. So Wilson, I don't think that snail was under any threat from the ants that we were watching. So they were focused on the termites. There's a little terrapin in the puddle ahead of us here. I want to make sure I don't run it over, but there you can see it swimming towards us. But we'll make sure we don't squish it, but something to bear in mind when driving down the dusty roads of Africa. There are often critters everywhere. We've just seen that snail, now the terrapin in the puddle, which is essentially a freshwater turtle, a terrapin. Yesterday we had a chameleon crossing the road. So you really got to keep focused on what's happening on the road in front of you as you drive. I'll never forget, I was on an interview drive at a camp in the Sabi Sands, the first camp I went to. Didn't get the job there. But the girl who did get the job ahead of me, the poor girl actually crushed a tortoise on an interview drive. She did well to recover from that and boot me from that position. And we're good friends now, and was a great guide. She's still working in the industry, but a terrible, terrible moment for her. She crushed this tortoise. You can imagine the sound. Not very pleasant. Monkey Man, you ask a good question and would like to know why are we changing the sunrise safari times, because you actually quite enjoy going out in the dark and potentially seeing the nocturnal animals. We should be doing that at night, like I said earlier. So we're kind of doing things upside down at the moment. The end of the safari should be into the dark, and there's a couple of reasons why. It's going to increase our chances greatly of seeing predators on the move. If and when we are with lion and leopard, it's more, especially lion, it's far more likely that they're going to start moving after dark than in the light. And our chances of being with them as they get active are greater in the afternoon into the night than us starting first thing in the morning, blurry-eyed, not being able to see tracks clearly on the road, and therefore the chance of actually finding them then is slim. So there's good reason why the safari industry around Africa kind of does night drives at night and not in the early morning, and that's just the way it is. And I believe strongly that it is better. Like I said earlier, the only thing that I would change is kind of 15-minute increments as opposed to half-an-hour increments, and maybe we'll be able to convince the powers that be that we can do that in the future. But I understand that there are complications for all of you guys joining us on these safaris of every few weeks we are changing the times. So that's their arguments and out of my control, sadly. don't worry, soon the tables will turn and we will be out after dark for a short period of time where we can look for the nocturnal animals. One last thing on the topic, Monkey Man, and that is that we are currently actually not geared up correctly to take you on an effective night drive. So that is the fundamental reason why we don't spend longer outs at night. Again, if I could choose, we would have equipment that allows us to film at night, so that we'd be doing at least an hour or so at night in the dark with infrared or nocturnal with night vision, because it's, especially in the summer months, you're going to be a lot cooler and more comfortable after dark as opposed to heading out at the time we do, and we will therefore also increase our chances of showing you things like lions hunting on the move and other nocturnal animals. But we don't have the right tools at the moment, but hopefully in the future we will get those tools, and then we'll be able to spend entire nights out filming animals. And the reason why it's so important to have infrared or night vision is because, like I said earlier, we try and impact on the animals' lives as little as possible, and by shining a spotlight in the middle of a pitch dark evening, you're naturally going to be having a large impact on the animals. So it is what it is. But something to look forward to in the future, Monkey Man. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and it will happen. We just need to be patient and also get more people involved in Safari Live. That way we can do the impossible. Currently we don't have quite enough people to justify massive changes. Alright, so there is some wonderful news, and as I continue searching for the Inkahuma pride of lion, whose tracks I'm hoping to find shortly, we are going to send you across to Jamie Patterson, who is on a foot safari. Enjoy.
Good morning everyone, and welcome to the Sunrise Safari Bushwalk. And just before we leave too far into quarantine, I wanted to show you this family of hornbills that's been foraging around. So this morning's walk is going to be a little bit different because we want to go and explore the boon that the rain has brought to us. We're going to be looking around quarantine for all kinds of things that have started to come out. The hornbills are feeling pretty joyful about the fact that it rained last night. All the insects are already coming, the frogs are calling. I'm sure Scott has commented on that fact. And I really want to go and explore, see if we can find you some of the things that we haven't really had much of an opportunity to show you since the start of the summer. All the insect species, snakes, frogs, birds, everything that we should have been seeing, but it's been a little bit too dry. And it's such a pleasure to be out on foot and not be looking at the desiccated landscape that has been around us. Feel the mud under your toes. Well, not quite, because I'm wearing shoes and I don't feel like stepping over thorns. And just in general explore and see what's decided to come wandering through. It's amazing how quickly it happens. Hello, Nyala. A couple of Nyala standing over there, nice and relaxed. The cool thing about the Inyala and the bushbuck that has been wandering around here is that they tend to habituate fairly quickly to people on foot around camps, which is why he's actually not even paying any attention to us, just keeping an eye every now and again before carrying on feeding. There's actually quite a few of them in there. It's just very dense vegetation. And while we stand and we listen, I'm not sure if you've been hearing the frogs that are calling. There was a raucous toad shouting out this morning. There's various other species that have already made their way out, rejoicing in the moisture that's in the air. And B. Wilson, you were saying it'd be great to see frogs since we hear them so often, but we hardly ever see them. And that's what I'm hoping to find, those little things that we've spoken about or that we might have touched upon but haven't really had the opportunity to see. I think we're going to go and explore. It seems as though that light drizzle from this morning is also eased up. It doesn't look like we're going to have too much rain coming through. So I wonder how much it was the wildebeest. We could hear the sort of sound of hooves stampeding earlier as we were coming out. And it's our favourite wildebeest herd, on quarantine as usual. Hello guys! The one thing about today is that it is fairly windy, and probably after last night, we've spoken a lot about it before, how these stormy nights for animals that could be potential prey for lions and leopards and other predators, those stormy nights with lots of wind are actually pretty scary. We noticed it yesterday just driving between DRC and Ingers. All the animals were incredibly skittish, absolutely terrified about the fact that we were coming through. So these guys are currently standing looking at us. The standard wildebeest. It's not quite an alarm call at that tone. Oop. Little calves scattering. Hello guys. And I noticed yesterday, little wildebeest calves that we've been watching, first of all are focusing more and more on solid food, not suckling nearly as often. But also the fact that their horns are now about this big on the top of their heads, and they're starting to get that dark colour of an adult wildebeest. Now usually with this particular herd, I've noticed you could actually walk in sort of into where they're going, the direction that they're going, and get right up close to them if you just sit down and let them come to you. But I think on a windy day like today, I don't know if we're going to be able to get up right close to them. And you certainly don't want an entire wildebeest herd panicking and coming running past. Well, that's an interesting point from Debbie. Debbie is watching in Vancouver, which she says is the ant capital of the world. And Debbie, you were wondering what species of ant we have here and what the most aggressive one is. Debbie, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I definitely can't list all of the ant species that we do have around here. But something like, for example, pugnacious ants, or drop-tail and cocktail ants with their abdomens pointing downwards or upwards respectively, they tend to be the most common species that we see. In terms of aggression, the matabele ants, if you really upset them, just have a look at this. Just because there's nothing more awesome than the way that a millipede moves, and we start to see them so often on bushwalk. The nice thing is, there's something that I always used to play with as a kid. A millipede or a shongololo, totally harmless. Hello, buddy. No? You don't want to come? So totally harmless, feeds off vegetable matter, unlike the centipede that they are related to. And the legs are the most incredible things, the way that they move in waves like that. They are incredibly toxic to eat, so humans definitely couldn't munch on them, and there's actually very few species that do eat them, one of which of course is the African civet. And one thing I might do is try and find you a pile, what's known as a civet tree. Look how cool that is. The awesome thing about the bushwalk is we get to get really up close and personal. Look at that segmented body. And the way the legs move in waves, so cool. It's a nice big one. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny little one that's just near it. The biggest millipede I've ever seen was probably about that much bigger than this guy, and probably about this thick. So they can get really, really large. This is a sort of a medium-sized one. A little one. When I was a kid, shongololos were great things to play with. We'd pick them up and they'd curl up in terror, And then we'd wait and we'd let them relax, and then they'd crawl all over your hands, all over your arms. I'm not going to do that to him now. A little bit older and more relaxed about just watching rather than having to touch. But they do feel incredibly smooth. Now, each pair of those legs is so beautifully adapted to the way that they move up and over obstacles. Show you the tiny little one. Here's a minute little specimen, a little baby here. How sweet that is. Miniature version of the millipede. Tiny, tiny compared to the one that's just gone wandering past.
A minipede.
A minipede. Oh, yay, Andrew. I love that. Wayne, you were wondering if the millipedes or the centipedes are poisonous? Yes, millipedes are poisonous, which means if you eat them, you will become quite ill. They've got quite it's almost an arsenic type chemical within them. So we avoid eating them at all costs. Oh, he wants to climb on my finger. He's busy touching it with his head, exploring. Hello. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Checking me out with his little antenna on the top of his head. You can feel him really lightly tickling my finger. So cool. Now he's climbing onto my finger. That was unexpected. Not where I was going with this, but oh well. So Wayne, yes, they are toxic, but centipedes are something different. Centipedes, and some of the viewers will be familiar with this particular aspect of my personality. Centipedes are my weakness. I don't know what it is about them. It is irrational. It's not something I'm proud of. It's something that I've worked on. But centipedes not scare me anymore. Obviously, I've lived in the bush for so long that it would be ridiculous if I was scared of them all the time. But they do provoke some kind of instinctive, atavistic, not a fear impulse, but definitely an impulse not to touch them. There's something that I don't have with snakes or scorpions or anything like that. Now, centipedes are venomous, which means they can sting or they bite and inject venom. So something like a snake is not poisonous, because you could in theory eat it, but it is venomous because it injects venom into you. And centipedes, which are relatives of millipedes, they're arthropods with those paired segments that they've got with the legs. In the centipede's case, it's one pair. In the millipede's case, it's two pairs. But centipedes are highly, highly poisonous. They have a very sore bite. It burns. And they can grow up to this length in this particular area. And for some reason, there's just something about them that I cannot handle. And just sitting here, just in this tiny space that we've been in, there's a pile of impala poo, impala dung. And already the tiny little dung beetles are starting to make their way in, as well as the smallest species of termites as well. There you go, that's exactly what I was after. Well done, Andrew. And look, this is actually a foraging team. They're going underground there. They've got a little tunnel.
Yeah, they do.
They've got a little tunnel that they're going into. So we're standing above a network of these termite, tiny little, I think they're harvester termites as far as I know. And because it's nice and cool, the workers with these pale bodies are able to come out during the day and are busy raiding. And some of them have moved right beyond Andrew and are wandering off down quarantine. Look how cool that is. Look at the way that they move, and it's so clear that they're moving over a specific trail. And in fact, even if you look as they move, you can almost see the groove that they're making in the soil, just wearing down of hundreds of thousands of tiny little feet over time. How cool is that? You can see their bright red heads compared to the paler bodies. And when insects are pale like that, you can almost always guarantee that it's something, especially with things like termites and ants, that it's something that generally only comes out either at night or on cold, cloudy days like we're experiencing now. And Andrew doing an awesome job. Some of them are actually wandering towards the impala dung that I pointed out as well. There's a trail of them that moves along here. And as foragers of plant material, that's what they're after. They're after bits of the plant material that's partially digested by the impala. Our millipede has wandered off. Now the termites are guided by a pheromone trail, so they have very powerful senses of smell in that respect. But Michael Fleetwood, you were wondering if the millipede that we were watching, if that has a sense of smell. My guess, Michael, is yes, but I actually honestly don't know. I've never really thought about millipede senses before. They can definitely see to some extent, and I've noticed that with most of the insects, they've actually got surprisingly good vision. And unlike us, they can actually see in certain insects can see in different spectrums of light. So some might see ultraviolet, some might see infrared. It's one of the ways that flowering plants utilize to attract insects to come and pollinize them. It's so cool because they basically guide the insect into the center. Millipedes, they can see, they can probably smell as well, but I honestly don't know. I've never thought about a millipede's sense of smell. And now that I think about it, shame, that poor thing is suddenly subjected as it crawls over your hand to the intensity of the scent. And you see, just walking a little way out onto quarantine, and already we've found a magical little world that we hardly ever get to see when we're out and about in the vehicle. So we're going to go look for more wonderful things to show you, and I'm sure we're going to find plenty if that's what we found in the last 50 meters. And while we do that, let's pop over to Scott.
Well, how awesome is it being on foot? I must say I am envious of you guys, and it sounds like you got off to a great start with Jamie. So good stuff, and let's hope that backpack keeps on working effectively. Now, often what happens is my mind plays tricks on me, and with the sound of the engine, plus the fact that I've got one of my hearing satellites plugged with an earpiece, makes hearing quite difficult. And I thought I heard guinea fowl alarm calling. Something like that. But I don't think it was. I think it was some Aramarked babblers. But I just heard let off a little bit of a babble. I think that's what threw me off. Guinea fowl, the chicken-like bird, can be a very good indicator of danger, especially when they're letting out that alarm call of theirs. But false alarm. So I've checked. Yeah, the babblers, yeah. Let's see what I heard. Oh, there they go. So I've checked very carefully for any sign of the Inkuhuma pride, but no sign of them coming back onto Djuma. It's not to say they haven't though, and because of the huge amount of rain we got last night, there's a strong chance that they may have walked and had their tracks washed away, wiped clean, leaving no evidence of where they've been. But I'm going to continue to check a kind of general area where they could have moved, and where I feel that they're most likely to have moved if they did come across here. And maybe we will find some tracks, and if we do, then we'll know that they're quite fresh at least. So, got a train smash that we haven't got any sign of them yet. And it is important to remember, while we focus on searching for animals like lion and leopard, which do need time invested in them, it's not that we're overlooking any of the other characters of the African wilderness. We'll take whatever we can get along the way. Thankfully, it looks like the rain is not going to impede the morning safari any further. And I'm just going to pull over here so Tibbs can show you. There's a little bit of blue sky off to our right there. So there we go. Seems to be clearing a little bit, these clouds. Now, I'm not being selfish, wanting our safari to continue unimpeded by the rain. Merely days of gentle rain days of gentle catch up to busy in the oh, Jamie's got a grasshopper. Enjoy.
And once again, we have found something for you. Here he comes. Let him come out. An elegant grasshopper that hopped onto our... Oh, hello. Now you're on my hat. Look at the amazing patterns of colour on it. Is he still there, Andrew? I can't tell. And if you look really carefully, within the inside...
He hopped off.
Hopped off. There he goes. It's okay, little buddy. My new best friend. And those incredible colour patterns are a way of him saying to people, hey, watch out for me. I am toxic to eat. In other words, I am poisonous. And the reason that they gain that poisonous or get the right to bear those poisonous colours, it's known as aposmetic colouring, is the fact that they feed on a very noxious plant known as milkweed. Many of you will be familiar with milkweed. I'm sure you would have chatted about it before, will have seen it before. It's got a really white, milky latex and then very strange shaped seed pods, and that's what gives that elegant grasshopper the right to bear the colours, saying, hey, I'm dangerous. And if I want to try and get one more look at him. A lot of the time these grasshopper species exhibit what's known as flash coloration, although he does it less so because he's so brightly coloured anyway. But usually on the inside of their legs they have either bright red or in this case bright yellow and black colouring, but you can only see it when the legs are stretched out and the insect is jumping. You're going to do it again? And basically what that is it has a startle effect. It's something used by the various species, including frogs, and I know a lot of you really want to see frogs, so I promise you that I will be keeping an eye out for them. And it's essentially that flash of colour. Whatever's trying to attack that creature is surprised by that and then tries to disappear or gets a fright, and then the animal that has displayed the flash coloration has jumped away and then folded in on itself, and it essentially makes itself a bit more cryptic. So cool. Another species that feeds on milkweed. That dung beetle nearly flew straight into my head. Wouldn't be the first time. Already the dung beetles are out and about, so I'm sure we're going to be able to find you some when we get to the piles of elephant dung scattered around quarantine. But another creature that feeds on milkweed is the caterpillar of the monarch butterfly. So all united with that aposmetic colouring. Just have a look at how awesome this little creature is. And I said to you we were going to go and look around the area. We didn't get more than 10 meters into quarantine. Have a look at this. This is a pill millipede, so a relative of the millipede that we were looking at earlier, all tucked up, curled up into his body. And I've never ever seen a pill millipede that doesn't do this. But look at the nice colour contrast with the black and the light colour. Awesome.
You can hold him like this.
I can hold him like that. Here we go. You can have a look and see it. Isn't he awesome? You can see all of the segments, and while I'm holding him like this, I can feel him moving inside just ever so gently. And obviously as soon as I'm finished holding him, I'm going to put him straight back where he belongs. So cute. Tiny, tiny compared to that millipede that we were looking at, but still the same deal. So plant material, anything like that. I'm going to return him right back where we found him, hiding under a log. Just goes to show all the things. We made it about 10 meters. One more thing I wanted to show you, which is, where did I see it? Oh, it was here. It was here. where all of the winged reproductive ants, so the reproductive termites that have wings. Now, many of our regular viewers are familiar with our termite explosions that happen just after it rains. All of the reproductive, or the termites capable of reproducing, start to come out and disperse. Most of them do not survive, and this is one of the reasons why. They're all trapped in this spider web. Now, I'm not sure what spider it is. I can't find the spider itself. I can't see the spider itself. But you can see, I think that these are actually being gathered by the termites themselves. That's interesting. Now, this would be more accidental than anything else, in my opinion. I actually don't think that the spider itself intended to catch something this large. But what's also interesting is that I think that these huge reproductives are actually the same species as these tiny, tiny little workers. So it just goes to show the size difference. It's amazing how differentiated the different termites are. So the workers versus the soldiers versus the reproductive members, and then obviously the kings and queens, much, much larger. So cool. Alright, well, we're going to try and advance another 10 meters or so, and while we do that, we're going to send you back over to Scott.
So, we've got some incredibly clean and dazzling zebra, and I'm hoping we're going to hear their call. They're a little bit worked up due to this wind. Let's try to roll backwards a little bit. We can't get you some good views of them, and I'm hearing some noises, and I'm not sure if it's them about to start their chorus, which sounds something like that. It's a wonderful call. Or if it was some hyena further away from us, possibly at the den site or from Vubu Road. But aren't they looking marvelous this morning? Hello to Ken, and as we watch these zebra disappear into some thicker vegetation, it's a good time to chat about your question. You're interested to know if and when it will start thinning out here in terms of the vegetation and making it easier to see animals. And it will be in the coming months leading into our winter, so anywhere from kind of April, May, June, it's going to start drying out considerably, and the leaves will die off most of the bushes. There are some evergreens, both trees and small bushes, that will stay green through the winter, but it does become considerably thinner than it is now and easier to see. However, we are not experiencing a regular summer in terms of lush vegetation because we're in a drought, Ken. So usually in summer we would be able to see a lot less far into the bush, probably about a quarter as far as we're seeing at the moment. So it's hugely different to a regular summer, which, to be honest, I'm quite enjoying. The weather as well as the more sparse vegetation is making our lives more enjoyable. It hasn't been nearly as hot this summer as it usually is over the summer months. It's been cooler than normal. From what I've seen, the vegetation is not nearly as thick as it usually is, which makes our lives a lot easier when looking for animals, when tracking. But it will be even due to the droughts. Now it's drier than normal. It's going to be a lot drier come winter. A lot less green around. How much you prefer the winter, Ken? Because of the weather and the scenery. It allows for easier safari going and longer safari going. The summer I find is quite limiting in this area due to the temperature, and also due to a normal summer you would have a lot more rainfall than we've experienced now, and obviously rain can quite often stop play when it comes to safari, or just make it unenjoyable. So there's my little tip for when planning your safari. If you would like to use my opinion, it would be the winter months that are the most effective in this area. Hello to Michael Fleetwood, who has been watching quite a few of the drives and is interested by the small amounts of zebra that we see here, and would like to know how often are they around and how many of them are there in general. Well, there are almost always some zebra around, just not that many of them, and it's the wrong habitat for zebra here, Michael. It's not open grassland. And the same goes for wildebeest. So that's why those two species we don't see in high numbers here. But they are kind of always around. We may just not be in the right place to show them to you on a daily basis. But to put things in perspective with regards to the Sabi Sands as a game viewing destination, it's incredible for seeing high profile animals like the Big Five. But I've had many a morning here when I was guiding guests where I would spend their final morning safari before they fly out at midday searching entirely and only for zebra. They've seen lion, they've seen leopard, they've seen everything except for a zebra come their last drive, and that's when you start panicking tracking the zebra, which is something that most guides in other areas of operation would never consider having to do, but that is a reality of the Sabi Sands, not the highest zebra numbers. Well, we saw one of the largest African land snails around earlier this morning, and it sounds like Jamie has just found a miniature version thereof.
And I do have another snail to show you. I have to confess, I know absolutely nothing about it, beyond the fact that it is not a giant land snail, and the fact that it is an incredible bright yellow color. And in fact, with this view that we have, it's worth just sitting for a moment and watching it move, because it's incredible. It is so fascinating. Slowly sneaking down beneath the log, exploring, looking for whatever food it happens to find. Those projections guiding it, immediately retracting as soon as they find something solid. It's so incredible. Look at the way they touch and then retract. Guiding the snail, letting him know where the projections are, him or her or both, as is the case with giant land snails. This is one of the most fascinating things to watch. I wish I could tell you more about it. I wish I could tell you the name. I honestly have no idea. If you have any idea, please let me know. I'm more than open to being educated about it. I have to confess, perhaps my snail knowledge is not as it should be. But we just couldn't resist bringing you these incredible images. Just look at this. And the wonderful thing about bushwalk is that the cameramen actually bring you the most incredible images. We don't really have to work for it at all. They do, of course, with their giant packs. But nature just brings you the story. So cool. Absolutely fascinating. Watch it slowly disappear underneath this piece of rotting wood. And that bright yellow color? Why is it bright yellow? My guess would be, Sorry, Andrew negotiating around all kinds of thorn bushes around him to get in and get you that shot. Our cameramen are super dedicated. So why is that snail bright yellow? I guess because it's a warning to say to things, hey, don't eat me. And he's going to slowly wander down beneath this log, which is filled as well with those little termites that we were watching earlier. I'm not going to hold it up for too long because I don't want him to go under and then get squashed. Just gently lower it. Amazing. This is the first time I have ever seen a snail that looks like that. That's what's so cool about bushwalk. I've never seen one before. Oh, now I'm going to get up before my legs start to freeze up. And what we're seeing so many of, there's millipedes everywhere. Now, Hannah, you were wondering, just to finish up with our giant land snail, you were wondering whether snails travel with their senses or how they work because you couldn't see their eyes. As far as I know, they can see, but I'm not entirely sure because the way it looked like it was moving, it looked like it was feeling its way and then getting an idea by using those two projections on the top and then the two below, and then slowly navigating the obstacles in that kind of way. I have to confess, I don't know that much about snails. I've never really, up until this point, I've never really stopped to consider them. I used to go and play with them as a kid, let them crawl over my hand, let them leave their slime trails everywhere, but I never really thought about snail senses. So, something I'm going to have to go and do some reading on. I'm sure many of you know a little bit more about snails, perhaps you encounter them in your garden. And there we go. This is what the elephants have all been after on quarantine. These are unripe but marula fruits, and it won't be long before the elephants start to come, if they get here in time. So you're going to have to compete with the monkeys, the baboons, the squirrels. Everything wants a piece of marula fruit. Now me personally, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to wait for it to ripen, because marula fruits do ripen on their own. Half eaten. Now what we're doing at the moment is just wandering across this incredible open clearing that we have here. And Meredith, you were wondering about why it is they call it quarantine. Now from my understanding, it was because this was where, depending on who you ask, strangely enough, I've heard different answers, but apparently this is where certain animal species were quarantined. Now one story I heard it was cows, the other story I heard it was wildebeest. Cows sounds the most likely because before this was included and incorporated in a nature reserve, it would have been probably an old farm in some way, maybe a game farm, maybe a agricultural farm, probably a game farm. And this was the place where the animals were quarantined as a way of keeping them safe from transmission of things like tuberculosis or corridor disease or heart water disease, anything like that, and even possibly rabies. So this was a quarantine, it was quite literally a quarantine area. And while we explore this quarantine area and find you more exciting things, let's pop back over to Scott.
Now, I was hoping that we were going to see a lot more water than this at the Buffelshoek waterhole. But as Teb zooms out, you will see that even though we got good rain last night, the land is thirsty and everything has been filtered into the water table below, and not much left for the animals to drink. But better than nothing. So at least there was some rain, but I was really hoping that there was going to be a little bit more water in this water hole. Hello, Teresa. And you brought up a good point. I'm going to continue chatting to you just once we've got through this little dip where we could lose signal. Hold on. Hope you're still with me. Sounds like you are. And Teresa, you are wondering whether there might be any fish eggs in this waterhole so that the fish can repopulate themselves once we do get some rain finally. And I'm not too sure. I don't think tilapia's eggs will actually survive the dry season, but possibly there's another small species of fish that did live in here whose eggs could survive a dry spell. I'm not entirely sure, but there are catfish that could well have submerged themselves in the mud, encrusted in kind of a mucus membrane, not encrusted, encompassed rather by a mucus membrane, and have a tiny breathing hole that they can actually breathe out of. I'm going to take this road and then continue checking our northern boundary up to our eastern boundary. So the catfish will lie dormant, saving energy, and can survive for many, many months under the dry surface of the waterhole until eventually enough water comes and then they can wriggle out of the mud and continue living. Hard to believe, but they are highly specialized and have this capability. So there will be fish, hopefully, or there should be technically. And also, what we need to remember is that there are other waterholes around us that have not completely dried up. And when very big rains do fall, fish will flow down the water courses and then land up in various dams downstream and waterholes downstream. So that is another way that fish can repopulate certain waterholes going forward. Hello to John in Pennsylvania, and you would like to know if some of the terrapins will hibernate when there's not much water around, because you notice that there's a whole bunch of them now heading towards the small pan at the Djuma waterhole. And the correct term, I think, is estivate in times of dryness, not hibernate, and that's in times of absolute freezing cold. But yes, they may well do similar things to animals like crocodiles will also do this. They will find a dark, safe place rather, a little excavation. Maybe they'll bury themselves and just lie dormant, and that way really bring their heart rate down, and that way they can conserve energy for long periods of time until times of plenty return. So that certainly does happen. I'm not sure where the terrapins will actually hide, but I'm sure that they do literally just switch off and wait for better times. Yay! Some elephants! We can just stop right about here for now and just check and make sure that this herd is in a relaxed mood, which it looks like they are. This is a young bull on the left here. And they will certainly be very happy after a night of this rain. They'll know that it's going to bring them more lush vegetation, some more fresh growth, and also more plentiful water in the surroundings. Wasn't that wonderful? I just stripped all the leaves off this round leaf teak. Woodlands kingfishers calling around us, virtual starling. And a lot of other birds. There's actually so much noise I can't work out who's making which noise. But the bush is alive after this rain, as it should be, and it's so good to be out exploring and sharing this with all of you. Looks like the rest of the herd are on the left of the road, and Tebbs is slowly making his way across there. This is probably a cow that we're looking at now, and then there's a few more cows and youngsters on this side of the road. Is this youngster going to give us a little display of its size and strength? It's possible it's got a little bit of a swagger in its step, but I think it decided against it at the last minute there. I hear a hyena calling behind us. Just trying to work out where exactly it could be. But it stopped. Keep it in the memory bank though, because it could well continue calling and lead us to something exciting. What I love about watching elephants is that they're always on the move, they're always doing something, unlike a lot of the high-profile animals out there. And what I find, oh, hello you. What I find especially interesting is their fussy diets and the way that they really vary their diet greatly throughout the year, and always test certain plants, sometimes a little sniff, then not interested, move on to the next one. And discussing the things I like about elephants, Tanner would like to know my favorite thing about them. And I think their intelligence is one of my favorite things. Obviously their size and their trunk and their very unique anatomy makes them wonderful, but their intelligence allows us to, I wouldn't say fully connect, but there's almost a connection and an understanding that you can feel between an elephant and a human. You sometimes get a feeling that they know exactly what you're planning and what you're thinking, more so than the other animals, I feel. So it's probably the intelligence that puts them above all the other animals, I think, in general, other than the primates, who are obviously very closely related to us and also not too far behind us evolutionary. I guess another thing that I love about elephants is their ability to roam huge distances. They're not bound to a territory. They come and go and move wherever they please. Bob Spooner, hello. And you'd like to know which animals are most active after the rain. Well, probably more so than any at this time of the year. The snails really enjoy moving about after the rain. They require moisture in order to be able to move around, more so than most of the other animals here. So yes, the snails are high up there, but also a lot of the insects only come out and are triggered by rain. The mammals tend to carry on business as normal, as do the birds, so no major differences there. But it's mainly the smaller animals, the insects and the snails, that are probably going to be more active than any other. Obviously the amphibians, the frogs, come alive with the rains. That's been evident already on the bushwalk mainly, where you've got to see up close and personal all those little animals on the move. Not yet a frog though, so we still need to try and find a frog of sorts. You get a beautiful frog called the painted reed frog, which you actually managed to find a couple of last summer. I remember Romeo, officially known as Jason, one of our cameramen who's now studying film at the University of Pretoria. He was with me, and we got a flat tire in the bush, and where we were changing the tire we noticed a beautiful painted reed frog right next to us on a thorny acacia tree. Some of you may remember that. Very small frogs that you can find away from the water, just latched onto a tree or a reed. Hello to Susan in Colorado, who would like to know if the elephants all have that same kind of brown shade of eye. And yes, all the elephants that I've seen have had that very same brown color. It'll be interesting if Indian elephants are the same. I can't work out why, but there's some kind of a light bulb flickering in this little brain of mine saying that I've seen a picture of an elephant with a different colored eye, a bluish eye maybe, and maybe that was an Indian elephant. But all the African elephants I've seen have got the same amber, orange, brown eye. Tibbs, let's see what this little youngster does. I've got a feeling this one on the left here may well do something for us. Come on, we are ready now. Show us how big and strong you are. Come along. Come on. And just to give you an idea, I mean, it's hard to gauge its size because there's no big ones next to it. But I'm guessing it's probably around 2 years old. And that's why it's got such good control of its trunk. Up until their kind of first birthday, that trunk can be more of a hindrance than anything else. Okay, we are going to send you across to ground level with Jamie, who's got some animals in the throes of passion.
And in this time of plenty, the millipedes are making the most of it. And in this case, we've got a ball of mating millipedes all wrapped together. I can't exactly tell you how many are there. I think there's 3 of them. There might be 2. It's a little bit hard to tell where one begins and one ends in this particular instance. And they are fascinating. Just by watching, we're learning so much about them. So for their first 4 segments, they have 1 set of paired legs as opposed to 2. And then right at the back of that 4th segment, you see that little sort of globe of white stuff? That is where they are mating, because in their 4th segment, that is, oh, look at that tick. Sorry, distracted. And they carry parasites just like we do. Ticks and mites are very, very common on the larger insect species, and in fact play a vital role in certain circumstances. The tick will be looking for a gap in the segments to maybe be able to feed off the millipede. But in the case of mites, for example with dung beetles, what they actually do is they clean in between the segments, and I imagine that it works the same for millipedes as well, so that they don't build up any parasites in the joints of their segments. They're all over the place. Now, there you go. That little globe in there, that is where the reproduction is currently taking place. That's where the seminal exchange is happening. So their reproductive organs are situated on their 4th segment. Here goes the tick exploring along. And speaking of millipede reproduction, which I have to confess I know very little about, Jen B, you're wondering if millipedes give birth to live young. I have no idea. I've been trying to work it out based on their structure. My suspicion is yes, but I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure is they're born perfect little miniatures of the adults. Now there's a couple of other arthropod species that are also that way inclined. So scorpions and spiders are the ones that I'm thinking about, where they're born and they hatch essentially exactly the same. Now in spiders lay eggs, and the eggs then hatch. And they quite often are looked after by the female. It's not that uncommon to have parental or maternal care within the arthropod or the insect world. Scorpions, on the other hand, at least out here, give birth to live young and carry them around on their backs as far as I know. So the question is, do millipedes lay eggs or do they give birth to live young? I really don't know. I'm more than happy to hear from you guys as to what you think. It's a total mystery. I've never thought about it before. I've just always accepted, this is why I love going out on bushwalk, I've just always accepted that this is the way things are and never questioned more deeply. That's also why I enjoy the viewers' questions, of course. There's something else down here. If I'm going to move over so that Andrew can come and have a look. There's a tiny little baby giant land snail. Now, watching this little baby giant land snail, I don't know how big the one was that you saw with Scott, but it's busy out and about looking for decomposing things to start to munch on. And Susan, you were wondering, and I'm going to apply this to the land snails as well as the millipedes because it's very similar. Susan asked about millipedes, but the application to snails is the same. You're wondering what their role in the ecosystem is. And they're So they are detrivore feeders. Sorry about that, we lost picture for just a moment, but it seems to be back up again. I wasn't gonna say anything, but Andrew accidentally pressed a button. But what you must realize is that Andrew's doing the most incredible camera work with a very, very little working room to actually be able to do it. Look at the way it's going over that branch. Now if we're really lucky, as we watch this muscular foot move across, you might be able to see the breathing hole that sits underneath the shell and allows for gaseous exchange, essentially like a lung. It's going to be very tricky, and I don't know how Andrew's going to manage it. I'll be very impressed if he does, but he's looking at the right section of the millipede. Underneath where the muscle joins the shell, there's a tiny little gap that opens up every now and again and allows the snail to breathe. Oh, just look at the way it's stretching. Stretch, reach. Oh, missed. Didn't quite work. Attachment didn't quite work. Is he going to manage this? That's quite a reach. Pull! I'd love to know the cellular structure of the way that their muscles work. It's stretched out like an elephant's trunk. I think it's managed to attach itself properly this time, pulling the entire, look at those. I was trying to figure out how snails see after that question from earlier. I'm still not entirely sure. Pull! Pull! Wow! Stretched right up there. And watching this particular snail, this is a very tiny little land snail that's done a marvelous job of stretching all the way across onto this log. So cool. There's also a spider there. Ah, there we go. We have an answer to our millipede reproduction question. I'm not sure what spider that was. Sorry, Andrew. So, Judy in California, thank you. Apparently millipedes do lay eggs. So the guess was wrong. They do lay eggs and they hide them underground and they then hatch after a couple of weeks. Who would have guessed? I didn't know. Thank you for that, Judy. That's awesome information and I will never ever forget it now. Well, we've made it another 10 meters along quarantine, still absorbed by the wonders that the bush has to offer. And while we look for some more, let's pop over to Scott.
Well, happy to hear that you got some incredible close-ups of the mating millipedes, the M&Ms, as well as a snail that came to spectate. Interesting stuff on ground level. These elephants are on the go slow, which is a sign that they are completely relaxed, not in any rush, just enjoying the cool weather, the fact that we've had some rain, and the fact that I guess the vegetation is slightly tastier than normal. There's not a fine film of dust over it. And they're really taking their time snacking along here. Hello AD on YouTube, who's interested to know if the elephants get hurt when feeding on a tree called the buffalo thorn tree. And no, I don't think they do. They're slightly more delicate with the branches of the buffalo thorns when plucking them off. But the leaves are very tasty. And you'd also like to know, AD, if any other animals eat buffalo thorns. And yes, certainly. Almost all the plants with thorns have developed the thorns for a reason, and that's a security mechanism to try and slow down the herbivores demolishing them. That's the only reason that thorns exist, and the main reason why thorns exist. So you tend to find the thornier plants are the tastier plants, whereas the plants without the thorns are typically less tasty, as a general rule. Now, the tree they're feeding on now is a bush willow tree. There's no thorns in it, so that's a good example of the fact that it's not always the case. But many, many animals will feed on buffalo thorns. Giraffes, the nyala, bushbuck, kudu, all of the browsers. Humans can feed on them. And I'll be able to show the rest of you a buffalo thorn that's just up ahead of us shortly once we move again. But before we do that, we'll enjoy this big cow who's making her way past us. Hello, Therese in New York, who's interested to know a little bit about the carving of elephants. Isn't she a wonderful big cow, this one? And Therese, the elephants, no, will not go into deep vegetation necessarily to give birth. And I've only once been lucky enough to stumble upon a herd of elephants after a female had just given birth. And it was in a big open clearing, and there were 6 or 7 females completely encircling the young calf, who at this stage could barely stand, and all 6 or 7 of these big females had their trunks nestled below the calf, trying to help keep it standing upright. It was an incredible scene, and what we learned from that is that they don't leave the herd in order to give birth. They stay with the safety and protection of the herd. Isn't the trunk a wonderful tool, the way you saw it reach up and snap that branch off? So there we have it, Therese. Hopefully one day we will get lucky enough to film an elephant giving birth. It's something that's rarely seen, and your timing would be incredible to be in the right place after a 22-month gestation period. If you look just behind the ear, there's actually a grasshopper. Oh, it's just gone behind a branch, but there's a tiny little grasshopper sitting on the elephant's hide. If you fully zoom in, are you fully in now, Tevs, and then go a little bit to the right, and a little bit more, and if we just wait here, there it is, you can just see it to the left of the big branch on the right. You can see a tiny little grasshopper in a crevice. There it goes into a better spot. Isn't that fascinating? Little grasshopper catching a ride on an elephant. Elephant back or elephant side safaris is what that little grasshopper's enjoying. Woodland's kingfisher just landed nearby and rattled off its call. And again, a wonderful sound of the summer. And the elephant, almost on cue there, was blocking its ear. It wasn't blocking its ear, it was just scratching its ear. And that funny little hairy tuft behind its eye there is its ear hold. It's hard to see now because it's quite thick bush, but there is a little kind of, there we go, now you can see it. You can see all those hairs there. That's the entrance to the elephant's ear, right there. And what's interesting is, unlike our ears, which are cupped like a satellite in order to increase our ability to hear, the elephant's ears are flat. So they've evolved to not have the best hearing around, but rather their ears act as giant or air conditioners that help keep their body a regular temperature. And it's not necessarily that they act as fans to fan air over their body, but more importantly, the huge amounts of arteries and veins that run through those ears, which allow liters and liters of blood to be pumped through there, thus cooling the blood, thus cooling the elephant down by cooling their blood. Right now, because it's not very warm, you'll see the elephant's not really flapping its ears that much, or almost on cue it started doing it. But in hotter weather, they will fan their ears more readily. And as it completely opens them, you may get a glimpse of all of those arteries and veins, but it's best to try and view that from kind of backward angle. We're a bit too broad side to it now, but you may have got a glimpse there.